97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
You know, we recognize the ability of the roster that's put together right now. And I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Andrew DiCecco will give us some thoughts on the game last night. Where does this team go from here? You know, it has been a conversation for weeks now, Andrew, regarding, is it Doug Pederson? Is it Carson Wentz? I don't know if last night cleared up that conversation one bit. However, I definitely think now that you have a new conversation coming in. What happens next? Because Carson Wentz can't go anywhere with that contract. I guess the next question is Doug Pederson was really pressed today. If you listen to his press conference, he was asked multiple times about his job security in about 5 different ways. I guess that's the big question now is in December, is Doug Pederson coaching for his job as the Philadelphia Eagles head coach?
Yeah, I think he is, Mike. And you heard what Sal Powell said yesterday. He finds it hard to believe that Doug Pederson can survive a 3 or 4 win season. Judging by Doug's body language, you kind of get the sense that he understands that. And you know where you hit the nail on the head. Where do they go from here? He was asked today. He was pressed about relinquishing play calling duties, and it still doesn't sound like he has any intention of doing that. He seemed almost offended at the notion of that someone would even present that to him because he doesn't think that he's struggling. I mean, so you're going to continue to see the same bumps in the road on the offensive side of the football. That sluggish offense that's just overall inept on every level. And like you said, they're not moving away from the quarterback. The quarterback's contract is not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere.
You just said something that's kind of interesting in the fact that, with Doug Pederson, he said, he kind of got offended by the question when asked about it. Do you get the feeling at this point that Doug wants to be here?
No, I don't. I don't get that sense that he wants to be here. And you kind of get the overall vibe that he wants to have full control and he kind of wants to have full say over who plays, who doesn't play, not have that watchful eye over him and things like that.
That's an interesting point you bring up in terms of he wants full say, because there's been a lot of talk. Sal Powell said it yesterday that there has been a collaborative effort in the front office. In other words, on draft day, when they make the decision to draft Jalen Hurts, and Doug was asked about this today, and he was very forth, like, why would you ask me that question? Everybody signs off on it. Doug Pederson, Howie Roseman, Jeff Lurie. That has been kind of out in the open, that it's a collaborative effort in the front office. In other words, hey, do you want J.J. Arcega-Whiteside? Everybody agrees. Yes, that's the pick. So we all want to blame Howie, but Doug Pederson agrees. Jeff Lurie is basically the one signing off on it. Same problem with any other missed pick we want to go down and revisit. So is Doug Pederson playing the company line saying, yeah, we're a collaborative, but I don't like this collaboration?
That's kind of the vibe that I was getting is that, hey, we're collaborating, but, if I had my voice, if I had my druthers, Mike, these aren't the guys that I'm taking. You go down the line and look at J.J. Arcega-Whiteside when I had the need of the safety. Juan Thornhill might have been a good pick there. A third-round pick might have been better used on Deontay Johnson. Just a lot of things like that.
When you look at the offense yesterday, what stood out to you the most? Was it the missed throws by Carson Wentz? Was it the fact that Miles Sanders only had 6 carries? Was it the offensive line, the lack of separation? I mean, the problem is there's so many options to choose from. What stood out to you most?
Well, Hunter, I would say there's a multitude of things. There's a lot of issues to that offense. And the first thing I would say is guys aren't getting open, right? Guys just simply aren't getting open, and when they are getting open, Carson's not having time to deliver the football. He's also not seeing them. Alshon Jeffrey got open. On the second play of the game, Greg Ward was open and he missed them. And then there's the protection breakdown aspect of it where, you have a guy like Jordan Mailata who's playing, who, by the way, graded as the second overall best lineman for Week 12. And then you have, just Matt Pryor struggling, and they get away from the running game. And it's just kind of a series of unfortunate events there.
Andrew, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how about the Jalen Hurts package? I mean, we did hear that we would see him more, and then Doug Pederson kind of downplayed it, and like he gets out there, and then you have the false start. But then you have a nice completion, and then instantly he's brought out of the game. Carson Wentz gets sacked. Then Carson Wentz goes out there again with Jalen Hurts, and he's at wide receiver. I just feel they have literally no clue what they are doing with this kid, and it's unfortunate for him. I didn't like the pick, but this is not the best way that he can be utilized.
Oh, you're 100% right. That was one of the things that kind of see the offense is sputtering, and they're looking to find a spark, and they put in Jalen Hurts. He completes a 6-yard pass. Then they take him out. What was the point of that? What did you accomplish by doing that? And I really do think that it was Doug's weird way of trying to get some semblance of offense. You look into the second quarter, I believe they didn't get a first down until 4 minutes into it. And then you take him out, and he basically said that he was trying to create a spark, and, he didn't really have the opportunities to put Jalen Hurts in the game, which I guess you could say, they were only trailing by one score. It was a fairly close game throughout. I guess you could say that, but, just stick with one guy, commit to him, which is going to be Carson Wentz, and, assess what you have in the offseason. This back and forth, throwing in Jalen Hurts here and there. If you're going to play him, give him a series. Let's see what he can do out there. Throwing him in for a play here and a play there isn't benefiting Carson, not benefiting Jalen Hurts or the team.
Well, here's the issue. Andrew, Jeff Mosher reported yesterday that Jeff Lurie was the one that said, hey, if basically like, hey, we want you to play Hurts. It sounds like the front office leaked out, hey, Hurts is going to play more this week, with the hopes that that message sparked Pederson to make the move. Well, Pederson all week long was not on board with that. When every time he was asked, he said, no, he's not practicing any more or less than what he normally practices. So I said it yesterday. You should not be surprised if you don't see Hurts at all because, quite frankly, Pederson doesn't want to play Hurts. So they have put themselves in this situation where they drafted this kid. It's a second-round pick. Now you feel like he has to play because the other quarterback's not playing well. So I don't know who takes the blame for taking a quarterback in the second round and using them the way they are. But that has to fall on somebody, and it can't be the head coach, right?
Yeah, I mean, it has to fall on the decision makers, Mike, is who it needs to fall on because there's obvious disconnect there. You have someone who, like the front office, they want to play Jalen Hurts because they committed to him, they invested in him, and then you have Doug Pederson, who, by all accounts, is a Carson Wentz guy. That's his guy. He wants to stand by him and let him work through this. And there's a disconnect, and that's what you see. Almost like he's trying to figure out a way to kind of find the best way to utilize both to keep everyone happy. And what you're kind of seeing is it's just a very awkward, the offense is lacking cohesion, and it just seems like he's trying to make, everyone happy here.
I'm not saying that in a draft, especially the first year of these draft class players, that they need to just be these world beaters right from the jump, but you are definitely struggling from this most recent draft when it comes to production. So let's look at Jalen Reagor. It was highlighted a couple of times that he failed to get some separation, and we're talking about Seattle, who has a really bad historic pass defense. What did you see out of Jalen Reagor?
Yeah, you're spot on with that assessment, Hunter. With Jalen Reagor, he still has a long way to go as a route runner. And I hate going back to this, but with having a truncated offseason where you're not really able to nail down the finer nuances of the position, you're kind of thrown in there. Obviously, you've seen other rookies like Justin Jefferson translate seamlessly to the NFL level. They're different types of players. Jalen Reagor is more of an explosive player. That's what they were going for. And Justin Jefferson was, by all accounts, he was perceived to be a more polished guy, but was a slot outside type guy. But you're obviously saying that he's the real deal. He has the full package. But with Jalen Reagor, he still has issues in his game that he needs to work through. It was a little disappointing to not see him get behind the secondary, that porous Seattle secondary. And, you kind of got to wonder if it's not going to happen against that team, when is it going to happen? Find ways to get him the football and keep him engaged and keep him confident. Get him the ball on screens. They tried that last night. It didn't work. But there has to be ways where you get the ball into your first-round pick's hands to kind of keep that confidence in him and also keep him invested moving forward to play out these last 5 games.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 here, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, one thing is, look, they outlined on the broadcast a lot of things last night. I mean, if you were watching that as Eagles fans, it was like in real time watching this drama unfold of, well, there's a guy open and he's not throwing the ball, and here's a guy open and he's, not making the decision. To me, Andrew, and you watch a lot of film and you study players, the play calling is not great. It could be better, sure. But I feel like when it's convenient, we say guys aren't open. Well, if they run 70 plays and 30 times there's somebody open, there's 30 opportunities. And the problem is we're giving them a pass by saying these guys aren't getting open all the time. There are guys open. His indecisiveness is killing them. There's guys open. We might not like the result of that open play. In other words, Greg Ward does a quick little curl. He's open for 4 yards. Carson doesn't throw that ball. And the next thing you know is he takes the sack. The play might only result in 4 or 5 yards, which isn't huge. But now instead of 2nd and 10, it's 2nd and 5. That indecisiveness to me is telling me the story that Wentz has no confidence. So yes, Pederson can do a better job. But if you can't complete the most basic of operations in an offense, which is just completing a 4-yard pass just to move the down and distance up a little bit, that's telling me that Wentz has much bigger problems than just the play calling.
Yeah, you said it, Mike. And I caution fans to look at the big picture and definitely don't absolve Carson Wentz of anything just because the offensive line isn't shambles and the play calling isn't what we all expected going into the season. You're right, Mike. There are plays where these guys are getting open. Granted, some of these plays aren't the most advantageous for offense. We're talking about 4-yard gains here, 7-yard gain there, but Greg Ward was open on multiple occasions. Jalen Reagor had an opportunity to get involved on some short screens. Alshon Jeffrey, if he throws that ball on the line down the left sideline, I believe it was in the second or third quarter, you can hit these big games. Guys are getting open. Travis Fulgham didn't get a target, I believe, until the fourth quarter. There are certain, and what I will say this is that the Eagles coaching staff needs to do a better job of scheming these guys open. Some of it goes on the quarterback, but a lot of it also goes on the coaching staff about finding ways to play these guys' strengths, get these guys open, move them around, and do some things. Because obviously, what they're doing every week is not working. So you need to find other areas, other channels to get the football to these guys because. What you're seeing is just, abysmal quarterback play and just an atrocious offense.
I want to touch on something that Seth Joyner said after the game, and Adam Kaplan says this too about Doug Pederson when it comes to coaching up the coaches, and that might not be his strongest point. So when you look at these wide receiver coaches, well, let's fire this guy, let's fire this guy, let's fire Carson Wentz. They continue to fire these wide receiver coaches. You're seeing the same production out of some of these receivers at the line of scrimmage. At what point does that fall on the head coach? Essentially, how much stock do you put on the head coach coaching up his coaching staff as well as part of his job?
I think that's a really underrated issue that is prevalent around this team. And how many times, like you said, you're going to keep swapping out receivers coaches? They've had a new receivers coach every season since 2015, I believe. When it was Bob Bicknell, and then they went to Greg Lewis. How often are you going to keep changing out these coaches, and the receivers going to continuously have the same issues, getting off press coverage, tracking the football, et cetera, et cetera. It's just the same things that are continuously problematic, and I think at some point you need to take a look at, okay, is Doug coaching his coaches hard enough? Is he on these guys about what they need to be really harping on? Or is he kind of just letting them just do, continuously do what they do? And I think that's a fair point. And you can't. I mean, it's not just the wide receiver position, the wide receiver coaches. You look across the board, and to different degrees. But the running back rotation is always sporadic and things of that nature. So I think that's a fair point. Or is he coaching his coaches hard enough?
We're talking with Andrew DiCecco, of course, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. So much to dive into on the problems this team has. Now, I don't absolve the offensive line has a lot of issues. Now, part of the problem is they got guys all over the place injured. Peters is playing guard. Pryor, I thought he struggled early. They settled in a little later. Mailata, you mentioned, I thought had did a pretty good job and had a really nice block. I guess was on the 2-point conversion run.
Mm-hmm.
So he had some moments. But that line in general, when you have the problems that you have on the offensive line, this goes back to the indecisiveness. You know you're getting pressure. So if you miss that first read, you have to anticipate pressure's going to come because you know that line sucks. So that's a big problem, is that the Eagles can't fix that right now. And that's another thing that the quarterback has to understand is that is going to be a problem. So I have to make that first read and get it out. So he's not throwing picks now because he's taking sacks. So my question is, there's a lot of sacks, and people are saying, well, the line's a problem. A lot of those sacks are on the quarterback.
Yeah, and Russell Wilson was getting hit a fair amount too. He gets outside the pocket and he finds other ways to kind of get the football out to his playmakers. You have to know going into this game that the offensive line is going to continuously be problematic and find ways to kind of work around that issue. Get the ball out quickly. He holds on to the ball way too long. He's doing a better job of getting rid of the football, but he's still holding on to it way too long. And you have to go through. If your first read's not there, boom, you got to get rid of it. You got to get it out to your second read. You have to. He's not seeing the field well, and he's also not processing things quick enough. And I think that's another big issue, throughout this whole season.
Well, and that's where we keep saying, well, guys aren't open. That first read, you mentioned Greg Ward, he's open. You might not love the result of 3, 4, 5 yards, but the whole thing is predicated on, and this is where they won last year, Andrew. They won with 4 yards to Ward, 4 yards to Perkins, 4 yards to, I can't even remember some of these, Rob Davis. I mean, these weren't.
And that's another thing. That's another thing I wanted to say, Mike. It's last season he was able to do. This season you're hearing about the lack of weapons, guys not getting open. The offensive line's not playing well. Okay, well, the offensive line wasn't playing. They weren't world beaters at the end of the season last year in December when they made that run. The weapons were far worse than what he has to work with right now. So at some point, these excuses are really going to run dry here, and you have to attack the problem. And right now, he's just a quarterback that's not playing very well. He's in a rut, and he's not seeing the field well.
Yeah, I'm not trying to discredit that point because they did play a lot better last season at the end, but they did play really bad teams. And, it did come down to playing the Giants, playing Washington. I do think that played a role, but that's not to discredit what you guys are saying because I think that there's a lot of value there. I want to get your thoughts on Miles Sanders, specifically in the passing game. What is going on? Because he is dropping a lot of these balls. And we talk about the inaccuracy of Wentz, which plays a role in a lot of things, but there are plenty of opportunities that I see for Miles Sanders to simply make the catch, and he's not doing that.
Yeah, you're right, Hunter. And that was one of the most baffling things to me going from last night. It's like the Eagles are trying, Doug Pederson's trying to simplify the game plan as much as he can for Carson Wentz with short throws and everything like that. And when he does deliver the football, guys like Miles Sanders are coming up with egregious drops week in and week out. And all of a sudden, you're behind the sticks, and that's why, and that's what leads to, poor play, and you get behind, and then you get away from the run, and everything starts. And it's the same story every week. Things start to spiral out of control. But these are plays that Miles Sanders absolutely has to make. You got to help your quarterback a little bit here as well.
Yeah, there's no question. I'm disappointed the way Sanders is because I thought out of the backfield last year he did a really good job. But I do want to go to a point. And I want to touch on a couple of news things today. We just talked about Wentz a lot and all the problems, yada, 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 yada. The question, I guess, really that needs to be asked is he fixable?
Yeah, I heard it. I guess the word that they threw to Doug today was salvageable. I do think that he's salvageable, and I think that when you get a new coaching staff in place, whether it be offensive coordinator, whatever, there's going to be some sort of a turnover next year. And then you want to see how he transitions and how he adapts to that change. If you're still seeing the same things, the same tendencies, the same issues, if they keep, resurfacing, okay, well then you have a problem, which is why it's important that you have to know for a plan B what you have in Jalen Hurts in some form or fashion. But I think that he is salvageable with just a clean slate. Just start over, hopefully you get a regular off season, a true offensive coordinator, a new quarterbacks coach that can really nail down some of those tendencies or have him get away from some of those tendencies and be the quarterback that he was in 2017 and 2018.
All right, real quick, couple things. Will Parks was released today. Why? And not that he was doing much, but that whole thing, you mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. Why not play him at safety, move Mills over because you're having so many problems with Maddox? They never really did that. Parks played about 10 plays last night. They just cut him today. How do you read into that?
Yeah, it's funny, Mike. I did a film breakdown on Will Parks for InsideTheBirds.com back in March when they signed him, and there were some things that I really liked that he did, but there were also some areas of his game that I thought, I think that's going to be problematic, or it's going to. I don't know that he's going to be, the second coming of Brian Dawkins or anything like that, like he was kind of being touted as. And he was also, and Jeff Mosher made a great point when he was signed. He was getting all these accolades, but he was signed to a minimum deal for a veteran. Obviously he took less money to play for his hometown. He had other offers from the Minnesota Vikings, of course, but I liked him. I liked the signing from a versatility standpoint, and unfortunately he got hurt and wasn't active until week 6. But he really never factored into the defensive equation. He was supposed to be this versatile chess piece that could play corner, that could play nickel, that could play that hybrid linebacker role, that could play, the single high safety role. And he was supposed to challenge Jalen Mills for playing time and even a starting job. And that just never materialized. And what I think happened was the coaching staff, they put him out there. They saw what they had in him in practice, and they probably, he was almost dealt at the trade deadline. He was dangling. His name was dangling in the trade deadline. So obviously there was a disconnect there, and they weren't really seeing what they envisioned when they signed him. And I think that right now, when you have a young safety in Marcus Epps who they really like, and a rookie in Kayvon Wallace, and you're sitting there at 3-7-1, and you're like, okay, well, let's see if we can get these guys some playing time, which is going to be valuable for these guys going, in the future. And it just wasn't working out with Will Parks. It just wasn't a great fit.
Since we're on the defensive side of the ball, DK Metcalf had 10 receptions, 177 yards on Darius Slay. I thought Darius Slay had some pretty solid coverage, and DK Metcalf just went up and made the play. But what did you think about his overall play? Because with Darius, it's like I did think he was there at times. Now he got beat too. It's just, did DK Metcalf just make the plays, and that's who he is, and no one can really stop him?
If you remember yesterday, I said that DK was essentially, he's scheme proof. You can't stop DK. I mean, outside of Jalen Ramsey, teams have really, struggled to find a way to stop this guy. And what you're seeing is just a great player. He kind of reminds me of T.O. and his body type and the way he gets after the football and his speed and physicality. I mean, he's just a great player. Like you said, there were plays where Darius Slay was there, and DK just made a better play on the football. And Jeff made a great point on the Inside the Birds podcast that Darius Slay struggled also with Chase Claypool, who also has some length to him and can high point the football and attack the football in the air and all those things. And yeah, Slay's a lengthy corner, but some of these big guys with their body control, they get this positioning on him, and it makes for a tough cover. And credit to Darius Slay, he owned his performance. He said that was the worst game I've ever played in this league, and he lost every 50-50 ball. And if you saw his reaction after the game, he knows what he's up against this week in Devontae Adams, and that if he has anything close to a game like he had yesterday, the Eagles are in for a long day.
Andrew DiCecco at DiCecco NFL, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. There's so much more to dive into in this game. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Eagles-Packers, we'll have that next week. We'll talk to Andrew about that when he returns to Football at 4. Thanks, pal.
My pleasure, guys. Take care.